Your name is still the same.
Yeah. Just start from the top. Yeah. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks very much for having me here tonight. I'm Alex Delle Donne. I'm Country Manager for Impact Water Solutions in Namibia. So I'm going to give you a very brief overview tonight of water in Namibia, how we use it, some of the challenges with the scarcity of supply, and some of the solutions that we as IWPs propose and advocate for. Skip a slide there. Okay, let me just get the hang of this apple quick. There we go. Okay, so the problem statement, water in Africa. What's the main issue? Unreliable supply is one of the biggest issues that we have. And it's largely due to the lack of access to affordable power. So if you look as an example, what's happening in Rundu right now, the big power cuts from Nampower switched off all the pumps that were supplying the water to the taps. So it's a simple problem, but it's a very serious problem that needs to be addressed. And it needs to be addressed in the perspective of diversifying the sources of the supply and looking at alternative ways of making the entire system a bit more robust and resilient. So the other impacts that we have around water management in general is to do with the regulation and policy and the accountability and the, let's say, mismanagement sometimes of water resources around supply and reporting and regulation that follows that. And then there's this interesting infrastructure funding gap that we are trying to fill, where in the space of degrading infrastructure, where equipment becomes old and outdated and things need to be upgraded, a lot of the big financiers are not willing to play in that space, and often the projects are too small, and we're looking at filling that space and looking at how we can help develop the market there. So just to prove that I'm not making any of this stuff up, there's a real problem with water supply. It's one of the biggest risks and concerns in Africa, and this is just from a recent poll, but you can do a bit of research and you'll find that it's one of the top risks and priorities, securing water supply. So a very brief introduction to Impact Water Solutions and what we do. So we're a development company based in South Africa, and we are labeling ourselves as independent water producers. So we focus on decentralized infrastructure, from using renewable energy most of the time where we can, and in order to supply our clients with autonomy and security of water supply. So this is a very short sort of recap on how we use water. And the little pie chart at the bottom there gives you an idea of the percentages allocated to daily water consumption use. So on average, Namibians use around 200 liters of water per person per day. And I think that's quite a conservative figure. So how we use that water, it's quite shocking to see actually. Over half of it is either flushed down the toilets or used in agriculture and gardening. So if you think about that, that's drinking quality water that we're flushing down the toilet and all the other uses it could be, utilized for. So the virtual water figure over there gives a really interesting overview of how we as consumers need to start thinking about what is behind the food we eat. And especially, for example, the cow at the bottom there indicates for a 300-gram steak at a restaurant, it takes 4,500 liters of water to produce that steak. So it's just important. Even free range. I think it varies. That's probably mass produced, but in any case, yeah, it's probably lower in Namibia, but there is definitely an impact just from the consumption of water that a cow has throughout its life in comparison to other alternative forms of nourishment. So something to think about, something to become conscious of, and to factor into how we use water. So what we do is focused on decentralized. So what is that compared to centralized solutions? We look at local issues and how we can address it within the local environment. So installing decentralized infrastructure can be, for example, in remote applications like mining or places where you don't typically have access to bulk infrastructure supply, like bulk water lines, or alternatively augmenting the existing sources just to create a more efficient cycle from alternative supplies, like I mentioned security earlier. And the benefits are typically quite obvious in terms of the scale of the projects that are implemented, but what makes it extremely efficient is the fact that with the smaller scale infrastructure, you really get the benefit of being able to tie renewable energy into it to power that infrastructure, which is very difficult on a bigger scale and typically can't be done quite easily, very easily. So it gives you the opportunity to optimize the system to the local environment. And in comparison, the bulk distribution systems are obviously play a very important role. They need to provide that minimum requirement to the consumers for their health and basic sanitation needs. But unfortunately, over the years of degrading infrastructure, the statistics today is that up to half the water that's abstracted from the sources, being it underground aquifers or dams, is lost along the way. So yes, almost half. That's, I think, quite a realistic figure in these times due to burst pipes, cracked things. So that is not just a disaster for utility from a financial perspective. They're trying to run a company and putting all the resource into abstracting, managing the resource, and half of it gets lost along the way before they get to claim the money. So it's also an environmental disaster because a lot of that water gets leaked and goes into the wrong places and results in groundwater pollution. So something that we need to address. Okay, so IWS, we look at the entire water cycle, and like I said, from decentralized water infrastructure, preferably powered by renewable energy, we look at how we can optimize and be an alternative source of supply to users. So end to end, even the financing component to try to fill that gap, and really looking at how we can make an impact where we develop our projects. The types of technologies we integrate, we don't focus on one thing, it's more dependent on what the issue is, but solar powered desalination works very well in a country like Namibia with great irradiance and obviously a very accessible coastline. So that's something that has a lot of merit, and looking at different systems like smart energy management systems and reporting systems, when you have the data in hand, it gives you a lot more power to plan forward and see how you're utilizing the resource and what you can do to optimize the system. So we integrate different types of smart metering devices in our instrumentation, and all remotely monitored through a platform that we built in-house using our own software. So the markets that we try aim for, at the moment, we're focusing a lot of energy into the public space, and you can imagine that's quite challenging, following on from our previous conversation. But we think it's really important to focus on trying to diversify supplies to towns, to communities, and even to utilities, where they can have water resilience from several sources of supply, rather than relying on that old degrading infrastructure. So private properties and mines are obvious ones for these types of solutions, because you can have fully containerized off-grid type of solutions that run only during daylight hours, and then farms and agriculture that require water treatment to a very specific standard. So this is just an illustration to show that what we do, nothing is really off the shelf. I think every problem needs a bespoke solution, and in the water space, that's especially true. So it's looking at the problem and developing the correct solution and financing package that might suit that. So again, utility as a service, I think it's a mindset change that needs to come in. It's something that's been well adopted in the energy sector, and I think it's becoming well accepted throughout most of the world. Being able to provide utility services from the private sector as an alternative or as a backup to the existing central infrastructure just creates a lot more resilience and efficient systems. And I noticed in New Zealand when I moved there, when I stayed there for a while, the first thing that happened when we arrived at the space we were staying was I got 4 different pamphlets of different energy providers. who were all trying to sell me the best package. It wasn't just, here's your bill for the electricity every month from the municipality. I had a real option of choices from many different IPPs who could provide me the best service. And I think it just creates better service to the consumers at the end of the day. So some practical examples of the projects we've been working on. In the south, near Botani, or in Botani, we've just commissioned and successfully installed the solar power desalination plant for NamWater. So that was a great project. The community previously was supplied purely from brackish borehole sources and drinking salty water for years and years. And now they've got clean drinking quality water to the highest standards. So really improving the overall health, like we were mentioning earlier, of the community and opening up opportunities to agriculture as well. So Phillipstown is a solar-powered borehole management scheme. Again, it was a municipality in the Northern Cape of South Africa that was really struggling with interrupted water supply due to old maintenance issues on the pumps breaking down and very manual systems. So we installed a fully automatic and remote monitored system powered by renewable energy. And so that now is feeding directly to the municipal network consistently, and we can monitor that from our offices in Cape Town. Hisekwa in Witstrand is a solar-powered desal plant that got installed in an estuary. I'll show you a photo of that just now to give you an idea of the scale. And that is supplying directly to the municipal network. Their issue was every December during their peak demand times, the town would run completely out of water, and it would be disastrous for all the holiday makers. So now we've supplied them with the security and the backup source essentially. And then, excuse me, a project we've been quite excited about for the last couple of months that's kicked off now is a large wind IPP in East Africa, where we are essentially installing a full power and water mini grid to not only do solar power desalination, but as well as storage and distribution to the local community, who's up until today had no access to potable drinking water. They get all their water delivered in trucks once a week in 250-litre drums. So we're doing the full scheme for them off-grid there. So I'll run over this quick, just some of the developments we've been focusing on and are still currently working on. A very exciting island off the coast of Tanzania, where we are proposing, again, a full water and electricity mini grid for the resort, 5-star standards that need constant high quality water coming out of their taps. And guests are not going to want, when they're paying $5,000 a night for the toilet not to work. So we have to make sure that that works very well. And we're going to have a few different schemes for the client there on how they can utilize that efficiently. In Namibia, we've been working closely with a few municipalities to see how we can potentially assist them at looking at alternative sources of supply. And in the Northern Cape, again, in South Africa, a huge mine that's looking at reopening. So they have about 500 meters deep of water. It's about 9 million cubes of water that's flooded the shaft. And they've got an opportunity to reopen the operations and open it up into a very successful open pit mine, if only they could dewater it and use the polluted water efficiently. REIAoN. Yeah, you can Google it. It's an iron ore mine. I might stand corrected. No, it's not Black Mountain. No. So we've been working on that also for almost a year now, developing different concepts of how to deal with that 9 million cubes of semi-polluted water, so that it can also run viably in the financial model of reopening of the mine, and how they can utilize that water for either agriculture or using it for the local community, for example. So there's an image just of what the Witstrand solar powered desal plant looks like. That's been running successfully for the last 3 years, and fairly small scale, nothing too exciting, but it is on a very highly sensitive estuary where it's a breeding ground for sharks. So very environmentally sensitive, and fishermen as well. So that's had a full EMP audit and zero impact from the brine discharge through the specialist diffuser device that's on there. And yeah, great success. Water security provided to the town, essentially. Just an overview of the borehole management system in the Northern Cape, and that's our online platform that you can remotely control and manage it. and that's Botani in the south of Namibia. So again, you can see completely off-grid, solar powered. There are battery systems installed on this plant just to allow a little bit of extra capacity production in the night. And there's our team installing the sand filters and RO vessels. So yeah, really again improving the overall quality of living there in Botani. Mozambique, interesting couple of examples of water kiosks that have been installed, completely off-grid, solar powered, water treatment plants, containerized. And this is just to give an illustration of what it looks like, how you can break the projects down, essentially into plug-and-play containerized type solutions that can be applicable anywhere on mining sites or even in towns on construction sites, for example. But up to about 150 cubes a day is practical for that. And then you can do anything from up to 10,000 cubes a day is practical for decentralized level. And then from there, it can be scalable as well, modular, but yeah, so it can really be tailored to suit the project, and all of this can be done obviously through either long-term agreements or lease agreements or upfront capital purchases if the client's interested. So how solar powered desalination works, it's two really old technologies, RO technology and solar are well established and mature, as I'm sure most of you here know. And the only issue was integrating the two, and this especially with the high pressure systems of the RO plant that need constant pressure to be able to function properly, and the fluctuating pressure that's coming in from the renewable energy source. So what one of our shareholders and technology partners, Osmosun from Muscara, did is they built a special software and an energy management system, as well as a mechanical integration that manages the pressure inside the high pressure system of the plant to regulate the different sources of energy coming in. So you can plug the grid in, but you can have it completely off grid. And if you're completely off grid and a cloud goes in front of the solar panels and you have a drop in power supply, like shown over there, it can regulate the system without damaging the high pressure parts and membranes in the plant. So quite a clever integration of technology. And what it's doing is it's really bringing the price of desalinated water down significantly by optimizing the power mix. Okay, now I would like to jump just to a quick general overview of water policy in Namibia. I'm no expert, but a few things that I think need to be addressed and looked at in a bit more detail. So Namibia has a great constitution, as we all know. It defines the well-being of Namibians, and that's very important. So we've got a good baseline. The Environmental Management Act is also very good. However, it doesn't really talk to water. There's hardly any mention of it. I think there's 1 or 2 pages, and it mostly references the Water Act. Now, the current legal structure in Namibia is that we are working to the Water Act 1956. So as you can imagine, quite outdated, and it doesn't really have the structures and implementing sections to be able to install good governance there. So there's the Water Corporation Act, the NamWater Act, which is essentially addressed to managing a utility, which is fine, but unfortunately, it still references the old Water Act as well. Then there's Vision 30, Harambe Plan, and NDPs, which all have good intentions towards accelerating growth or creating water security, but there isn't really the driving factors in those documents on how to do it and how to implement it. So what needs to be done needs to be fast-tracked. This legislation needs to be looked at in detail to understand how we can get the right governance structures in place to actually secure water into the future and manage it well now. And everyone is referring to the latest Water Resource Management Act of 2013, which is a great policy document, like I mentioned earlier, excellent policy in place, but it has not been enforced. It is a very complex document, unfortunately. And so my guess is that it's quite expensive to implement as a result. So there's been a huge delay from 2013 when it was gazetted to today that it's still not legally in practice. And that needs to be addressed. So we're all aiming towards this Water Resource Management Act, potentially with some changes in it to address more Namibia-specific issues. But that is something that needs to be done urgently to create accountability. So just to wrap that very brief session up, we need to change the way we think about water in general, about how it's supplied, how we monitor and create accountability on the usage of it, and how we recycle it. I'll do another session on wastewater reclamation and treatment at some next 29ers. But just so that everyone knows, there is a water shortage forecast for 2023 in Windhoek. And that means water restrictions, that means less water usage at your home, which is part of the goal to use less water, but ultimately that stunts economic growth. If you can't push development and if you have limited water resources, you're not going to be able to grow your industry. So I will urge everyone to please watch the South African Water Chambers session recently launched on their mission to unlock water security, because their problems are a lot bigger than ours. They've got in the hundreds of billions of backlog on maintenance on their infrastructure. And I think in a country like Namibia, we've got the power to implement the right policies and make a change quickly. And I think South Africa still has some time to catch up. So watch that video, I'll post it on Slack. And if you've got any questions, please shout.
Everyone should have questions.
Yes.
I would have one.
Please.
The first pie chart is still with me.
I'll go back there quickly.
Where we use a third of our water just to flush it down the toilet. And although a lot of what you presented is very great on a macro level, I kept on thinking about my own house and how we have a systemic problem in how the plumbing is done and thought of and how we think of plumbing. And I was wondering, is there a solution for a household or for how we, like I was just thinking, I would like the water from my shower to automatically be there for my toilet that I can flush with the, so can that be done? How is that be done? Is it being thought of? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that great question. So grey water and water recycling is a huge industry in itself. So obviously Windhoek is quite pioneering in its reclamation plant around the world. Everyone speaks of how Windhoek sewage is reclaimed and goes back into potable water. So already we have the expertise for the last 30 years or so in Namibia to more, so the upgrades. And how you can do it in the home, and that's what I mentioned at the end. I think that's a whole nother session to talk about localized, decentralized wastewater treatment and how we can combine that with conventional water treatment methods to create a very optimized water cycle. We have companies that we work with that focus on small-scale decentralized solutions. So not a packaged plant, sorry, that's not the correct technical terminology apparently, but localized wastewater treatment plants you can actually bury in your garden that can take the raw sewage, even from your toilet. I mean, this is more advanced than grey water recycling, and treat that to an acceptable effluent standard to then be able to mix and use with grey water. So you can really combine, you can have a system installed that combines the grey water from your showers, for example, like you were saying, with treated effluent from a local decentralized wastewater treatment plant, and give you quite a significant volume of water to then either go back into the flushing system, if that's optimized in the design, or otherwise be used for your garden or agriculture or anything, so to a certain standard. So there is the opportunity.
It doesn't have to be sophisticated.
It's not sophisticated, it's accessible. Yeah.
So just thinking how we build houses, could that not be automatically?
Yes. No, for sure. No, and the comment is that we should look at how we integrate this into the way we build. And I'm quite passionate about that as well as a structural engineer in the buildings industry. I think we have a long way to go in advancing the way we think about buildings and the way we live in cities, in urban areas. So,
I didn't quite understand what impact water solutions are. You an NGO or a business?
No, we're business. Again, sorry, I'll explain this a little bit better. So we are a development company. So we finance, design, build, and operate decentralized water infrastructure. So we have, from the backing of our financial partners, we've raised capital. So we invest equity into the projects, and we also obviously do jobs like tenders, for example. I'll go back to this one quickly. So this was a tender that was Namibia won a bid through the adaptation fund. They did an application for financing a pilot solar power desalination plant to use the data and experience essentially from implementing this type of technology and running it in Namibia to understand how they can utilize and build more of them. So through this funding, NamWater was the executing agent, and they then put this out to tender, like a conventional EPC engineering procurement construction tender. And we applied to that tender and we won the best bid as a subcontractor and as a specialist subcontractor who could supply and run this specialist technology. So we have in-house process engineers, mechanical engineers, project managers, and so we can design, build, operate, and finance all water infrastructure projects on this type of decentralized scale.
And if you finance it, then you
yes, so exactly, yeah. So there's a way of doing it through long-term leases. For example, if I use mining as an example, a mine might not want to spend the capital right now on building a water treatment plant on the site. They might want to reallocate those funds to other operational expenses. So then what we can do is we can design and package a solution that works to their financing term requirements, so over a certain number of years and up to a certain amount per month, for example. And then we can implement and install the plant for them and charge them a monthly lease fee. So it's one of the options. The other option, and that's normally around 6 to 12-year terms. On a longer term basis that we're focusing on, for example, with utilities, is we want to actually be able to build the plants for them and just go into a water purchase agreement so that over the, say, 20 to 25-year period, we sell the water per meter cubed at a tariff that's competitive and affordable to them, and at the end of the day, benefits the consumer. So I hope that explains.
Yeah, just a question. In terms of course, that all speaks to all of us if we give the water forecast sorted for 2023, just a year away. Is that because of population growth, or is it based on the water resources drying up?
Yeah, so it's a combination of those. So it's increasing demand pattern, so due to growth, natural population growth and growth in industry, as well as the limited resources. So Windhoek relies mostly on the 3 dam system north of Okania, the Swakop Upper Umataku, what they call it, basement catchment area. And then that all feeds down into Windhoek as well as the Windhoek aquifer. So those are all limited surface and groundwater resources that can only supply a certain capacity. And as the demand and industry and development increases, that source remains finite.
They are all old aged anyway.
And they're all
what would you suggest would be the solution?
The Windhoek is a difficult one. I don't know the answer. I think everyone's still scratching their heads around it. And some of the funny suggestions that are going around is to stop development in Windhoek and move everything to the coast. I don't know how realistic that is. Some of the other suggestions is to pump water from the coast, desalinated water from the coast, all the way to Windhoek. It seems like a bizarre engineering feat to me, but that's potentially an alternative. And then from the north of Namibia as well, pumping water down where there's a better resource.
Now, there's an entity that seems to be providing solutions. You offered solutions in terms of the water shortages that has been experienced, say, across the country.
Yes, we have.
To the responsible.
Yes, yes, we have. Yeah, without going into too much detail, we've offered our services, our solutions, our opportunities to develop projects to assist local authorities and the utilities. Yeah.
That's important.
And our financing, of course. We've not just provided our solutions in terms of our expertise.
Yeah.
We've provided an opportunity for financing to bring foreign direct investment into Namibia and implement these projects for Namibia. And without going into too much detail, it's still a challenge, and we still need to change the way we think about decentralized infrastructure and how they can complement and benefit the existing sources of supply. I'm here based in Namibia. I'm based in Namibia. The rest of my team is in Cape Town. Yeah. Thanks very much, everyone.
So 18 months ago, on the 29th of February 2020, when we launched 29ers, Alex was that quiet guy in the corner there who felt that he must talk because everybody else talked. And ironically, that day there were 29 people here, and he was the 28th. Rolf from Point Break was the 29th. And he got up there and he said, I've got all of these ideas, I've got all of these skills, this is what I can contribute to Namibia. And that night, a number of people went to him and said, my God, you can do so much for this country. And I think you've all seen that tonight.
Yeah.
So I'll declare my interest here. And that is that Alex is married to my niece. But that's a little bit irrelevant to this discussion.
Yeah, it's far away.
But I think you've seen what private sector solutions can do. And Alex is being a little bit diplomatic here. To your question, Chairman of the APRM.
To the diplomat.
No, not diplomatic.
To the diplomat. Yeah.
Some of these projects have gone as far as cabinet and been rejected by cabinet because of monopolistic tendencies in Namibia. So I'm going to open up this discussion now. And like I put Ben on the spot to ask what can we do? And I'm going to tell you right now that these two presentations are the best presentations we've had here. And we're not going to settle for this small group of 29ers. I promise you that I'm going to get these two presentations at least to the Harambee team, which I was part of, because these are presentations we should have had before Harambee was concluded. But Harambee is still an open book, so we're going to get there still. These literally are presentations that should be made at cabinet, because both these presentations can change the course of this country.
I can't hold myself back.
Yeah.
I just have to reiterate. This has been the best night of 29 ever. Seriously. So this must be spread wide.
So the founding mother of 29ers is just saying that this is the best presentation, the best 29ers, but poorly attended. So I feel bad about that.
We are all the 29.
Feel bad about that.
But
But literally, it's our responsibility to get these two presentations escalated to a high level. So the question that I was going to ask before was this: what is the environment that's going to unlock this unbelievable potential, innovation, funding, collaborative spirit that we see here? What is the regulatory environment that's going to unlock that? We heard from Ben that it's been arbitrarily moved despite cabinet decree, potentially moved to one-line ministry.
There's rumor that it is, so there's no confirmation.
All right, potentially moved to one-line ministry. So we have freedom because we run this country. So we have freedom to say how this country should be run. in this exercise we're doing. In the ideal situation, what is the environment? We've had Nangula speaking here, we've had James speaking here, and they'd like to hear this. What is that environment that's going to foster this private sector initiative, innovation, and collaborative spirit? I keep hearing that line ministries and monopolistic SOEs, on which I serve on one of the boards in the ICT sector, and we keep getting accused of being monopolistic. So what is that environment that allows these multi-sectoral projects, which they clearly are, to really bring the best out of the private sector while not allowing speculative or abusive behavior? Because that's the reason why you have regulators, so that the man on the street is not abused. So much of what I see in these projects is not just multi-sectoral, but involves power and water. And I want to ask JB to come into this discussion now as the chair of the Renewable Energy Association, because a number of projects that I've looked at, and I serve on the PPP board, and they're either water or power. And we don't seem to have the capacity to say this is a water and power and permaculture and food security and all of that. So what is that environment that we need to be able to take these multi-sectoral projects and get the best of private sector into the equation without abusing the consumer? So that's the question I leave with you, all of you. So JB, maybe a small statement on renewable energy and your association, and then Ben and Alex can come in.
Okay.
Just a conversation. Are there still people that are in? Yes, I see there's people that are in here. Okay, so I didn't really prepare too much. I actually do have a small slide deck, but I don't know if it's worth actually putting it out. I am Jan Baden Scheepers, or JB Scheepers. I'm the chairperson for the last 2 years of the Renewable Energy Association. Some of you might know about it. We were probably established about 10 years ago, but it was mainly run by enthusiasts and almost hobbyists, and then slowly it became installers and some contractors. But since 2015, Namibia has actually had a massive renewable energy revolution, and some of you might not know about this, some of you might know about it. And, you know, I'm going to actually just quickly put in my slide. Can I quickly put in a slide? It's actually quite interesting.
You keep on talking, I'll try to do the text up.
Okay, so just quickly touching on who is REIAoN, what are we doing now, what is our mandate? We're a members-based association. We're actually open to anyone.
Outside of the industry as well.
Exactly, even enthusiasts and whatever. We also are trying to attract the public sector into it, but just, I mean, the procurement process for them just to even become a member of something is a problem. But they show it is, where is it? Yeah, sorry. Great. Can you see?
Not yet. The Zoom cannot see.
Okay, so we are a members-based association, and basically we're just trying to create the platform. So I really liked your wording, by the way, around that. We're not implementers. We're a platform for collaboration and just getting some people into the room together so that we have more than one mind in terms of how do we direct the renewable energy sector together. So one of the things that I had to do basically when I came in as a chairperson is transform the association from just being a bunch of enthusiasts, although that is very important, to also start including the independent power producers. So this maybe now ties into a little bit of what Alex was talking about, because the renewable energy industry is about 6 years ahead, maybe 7 years ahead of where the water industry is today. In 2015, Namibia got its first large-scale solar farm at Umpuru and Omaruru. And since then, a whole bunch have been, I think it is, they can see it now. Oh, you're trying to share it on the
Zoom, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, at least they can see the smaller one,
Okay,
I think.
but
Sorry
then
for
I
that.
can take over that one now.
Yeah, I'm just quickly try to. Sometimes doesn't work as well as it should. Anyhow, you have Lisa.
It doesn't really.
Zoom, it's not-
Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I almost thought that I wasn't going to show anything, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of what has happened in Namibia. This is currently all of the solar farms, or it's actually every single farm that's in the country, any energy generator in the country. I'm just going to sit down a bit like this. So Vanak, which is the black block there, Windhoek, that is our coal power station. We've got the top orange one, which is the old big boy in the country, which is REIAoN. And then you've got gray, which is like a tiny little plant that they built last minute to try and help Namibia a little bit when South Africa was having its load shedding, Anigas. All of the yellow ones are now major solar farms, which are at least 100 million $100 million Namibian dollars of investment. And you even see a plant like Alton, 37 megawatts. So what is that? That's about 700 million investment.
Cumulative megawatts?
It's a bit of an unknown, but it's somewhere. Oh, the cumulative megawatts is, wait, it's on one of the next slides. I'll get to that just now. That's wind. So that's Namibia's first wind farm. That's over there, and that is also set to explode in the next 2 to 3 years. The list of reds are going to move quite a lot. So I just thought it's kind of interesting from a policy point of view. Yes.
You say they are all from ever since 2015?
Yes.
The yellow ones.
Well, yeah, all of the yellow ones and the red one are from 2015. So in this, so here's a very important point that I want to tie to Alex's point. I'm not really even talking as REIAoN right now. I'm just going. So Alex talks about, obviously coming to the government with solutions and so on. And that's what has actually happened. This is private companies coming to the table, investing somewhere between 2.5 and 3.8 billion. Well, that's the thing, is the government now is getting all of this power, and they haven't had to risk any of their own money. They didn't need to wait for their own guys to have the skills necessary to do it. The private companies came into it. Now, Namibia has reduced its imports by a significant amount from South Africa, and there's just generally a lot of good that has come from this. The amount of financial institutions, the GIPF is making so much money. So it's even the civil servants, through their pension fund, is now got a really reliable investment portfolio, which is very rare in Namibia. And that's really done a great job for what's happened in Namibia. So I'm just going to quickly get to some of the, okay. So here's just a small little history. If you look at, no, this is actually not such an interesting slide. So I'm not going to really follow the process. Here's what's quite important. Local contributions in terms of percentage in the country. And the red is obviously the imports. And you see 2015, 2016, 2017 over there, it's somewhat stable. That was also when our drought really started hitting us. So REIAoN was doing worse. And that's a huge chunk of our power consumption. But from about 2016 to 2017, you really started seeing a lot of solar farms coming online. 2018 was finally that big one that came on, the 37 megawatt. And look at the difference in imports to locally produced energy that's coming in.
Offset REIAoN.
Exactly. Well, not offsetting REIAoN, offsetting, because REIAoN is now in good flows again, but they're offsetting the imports. They're importing offsets from South Africa. So that red line, 2018 to -19, that red line, I think, accounts for something like 5 billion Namibian dollars that we give to South Africa just so that they can give us power every year. Whereas we can now start producing a lot of that ourselves. So now there's obviously a whole bunch of interesting things around. So coming back to Stephen's question is, why did this happen? Policy. And maybe pertaining to a little bit of what you guys are talking about, is in 2015, maybe it was 2014, it was somewhere there, the IPP Act was launched, which basically meant that independent power producers could start joining and selling into the national grid.
But the question obviously begs, why not more? I mean, why are we still importing 59%? I mean, there's an opportunity, obviously, it's just not. And then we talk about huge, massive other projects like hydrogen and so on. Why not first actually tackle this one?
Great.
Because that will solve a huge deficit in our national tax pipeline. I mean, that's a no-brainer.
I fully agree, but the truth is we've almost reached the maximum that we can have on solar, because solar is during the day. Our load profile, it was one of the things that I forgot now to put in. When does Namibia use its most power? Just after sunset. We're not an industrialized country. We don't have factories. Everyone going home and putting on their stove and putting on their kettle and taking a shower, it skyrockets. Then the sun is down. Then we need South Africa. Wind is going to make a huge impact on there, because Lüderitz has almost always got wind after sunset. It's going to be great. But again, we're not going to be able to be fully certain. So we are in Namibia currently waiting for the advent of affordable battery technology, storage. But it's not affordable yet. We're still quite far from the affordability point of view. But that is where the next step is going. But I just want to quickly redirect back to policy. One of the things that the government did to try and encourage even more liberalization, which was actually very commendable, is something called the modified single buyer model. I'm not sure if anybody has heard about the MSB. Now, the MSB is kind of what Alex was alluding to, where you actually start injecting into the network and making deals with other people. So it's not me building a solar farm at a mine. I can actually now sign a contract with a mine in the north of Namibia for my wind farm in the south. And I just use NamPower's grid as a road. It's a logistics hub. So suddenly NamPower is slowly moving into the direction of not becoming a power generating company, but a power transportation company. So now all of the private guys can start generating all over the country, but it completely liberalizes everything. So now MSB, in theory, is going to probably increase what we see on that first slide by 3, 4, maybe even more. Problem is, MSB came into effect 1st of September 2019. We are now, well, it's now been exactly 2 years, and no one has actually managed to get onto it yet. And that's actually my private job. We are permanently trying to do it. It is just so complicated, and nobody knows. So it's the leading energy policy in terms of this type of thing in Africa, but we don't know how to use it yet. Nobody knows how to use it yet. So there's just unfortunately been, so one of the big sore points is the last PPA that was signed. So that's a power purchasing agreement that was signed, I believe was that 37 megawatt. And that was then finished in 2018, 2019.
Where's it?
In Marienthal. Is it? Yes.
Yeah. That's the
It's huge. But there's been nothing again. So this policy that was supposed to be the harbinger of tripling this has not had any real effect in 2 or 3 years. So this was the one thing that was kind of keeping Namibia's economy moving and creating hundreds of jobs. There's been very little, unfortunately. So it's again, one of those things is like the policy is so clever. We're not getting over the finish line. We are just, and the ECB have got really clever people. NamPower have got really clever people, but there's a mishmash that is holding us back, and it's really, really unfortunate. So maybe then the summary of what I'm trying to say is it's interesting that you guys as water, I mean, me and Alex have even worked together on some of these projects. We come with the solar side and help them with the desal. But some of the things that we see is that there needs to be that first precedent. The government needs to realize that we can allow the private sector to help us, but at some point also not create such policies that are so complicated that nobody can even participate anymore. So Namibia's big revolution lasted only for 4 years, and now it's been dead again for 2 years. It was quite sad. But I say that obviously with full respect, because people are trying hard, but we're just not getting the things together.
JB, with due respect, we're very clever people. Yeah. So, you are. What is the problem of the storage problem?
No, it's just too expensive at present. Costs are coming down.
Why aren't people looking at more in depth? Everyone just like shrugs it off.
No, it's you'll so Claire, 10 years ago, solar power was too expensive for Namibia, but it became cheaper and cheaper, and then suddenly in about 2014, 2015, it started making sense. And then, yeah, we're on it. We're on it. So interesting. One of the things that REIAoN did is we've just commissioned a paper by Detloff van Ortsen. Actually, just so that I'm fully transparent, that's some of the diagrams that I took from that paper was specifically on how we can start implementing storage in the next 2 years in Namibia on a major scale. But yeah, I think that's the major thing is we need to start being very, very sober about the fact that we joke in our office, so we can't keep, and I hope there's no Norwegians in the room, but we can't keep asking Norwegian consultants to come and write our policies for us, but they sit in Oslo and they fly in once every 6 months. They've got no context. They've got no understanding. So I actually refuse to say that a policy is good if they can't implement it in this context. Then it's a bad policy. It's like it has got nice words in that, but it's a bad policy because it's not context appropriate.
Funny that you pick that example. I was looking at the geological survey in 1990, but second we became evident, and who did they bring in but the Norwegians to tell us how to run the geological survey? And none of it was in a rock, it was always under snow. Sorry, but it was really like doing something that wasn't broke.
Yeah. I obviously just use them for sort of facetiously, but I think it's just important that we come up with those solutions so that it's contextually appropriate.
So I ask this question again, in this utopic state of Wakanda, what is the regulatory framework that we need? Is it NIPDB negotiating with all the regulators, or is it a super regulator like that or something?
I think probably I'm going to steal your words here, but I think there needs to be some sort of a balanced body that is equally represented from the civil society, the public space, and the private sector. And those people need to be sort of, it's almost like a Senate with incredibly strong accountability, can hold accountability very strongly on.
All due respect, in this country, who are those people?
Well, look, that's creating that's going to be difficult, obviously. But I think the concept needs to be that slight the separation of church and state.
Yes, but some oversight, but we are too little and too small. It's always all the same people.
It is. It is.
We forgot people on that.
Yeah.
So they're losing us now. Maybe we should thank them.
Yeah. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining. I've been told that I need to put off the Zoom. I hope everyone has enjoyed that and that you'll get the recordings. Debbie, thank you for recording, I think. Okay.
And yeah,
Let's find out how much power does Wakanda supply?